Baseball is back. Perdomo makes the play.
And a high fly ball. No doubt about this. Home run Marte.
They're going to send them all the way around. Corbin Carroll with an inside the park answer back.
I'm Ivan Melendez.
I'm Luis Gonzalez.
I'm Tori Lavello, and you're listening to the T-Backs Podcast.
T-Backs Podcast.
T-Backs Podcast.
Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T-Backs Podcast, Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast. And I've got to say, wow, how about that new intro? I'm pretty proud of that. Past, present, and future D-backs all coming together to make something pretty cool. And I've got to say thank you to the guys for doing that for me. I very much appreciate it. Today, we are talking hot stove tea. So, I've, of course, got a piping hot cuppa right next to me. It's ginger spiced as we get into the single figure temperatures here in the UK. And we're talking of some pretty hot news despite the falling temperatures. We are talking, of course, about the possibility of a big off-season being make or break for the D-backs. There's two bits of news that we're going to talk about. And firstly, first base. And secondly, we're also going to talk about pitching. So let's get right into it. Let's get on with the show. First big question for the Diamondbacks this Stove League. Can they hang on to Christian Walker? A big Gold Glove winner, of course, at first base. Gold Glove defense, slugging hitter, has been here for a while, sort of cemented that first base position as his own. So critical part of the diamond for the Diamondbacks. Makes pretty much more outs than anyone else on the team when it comes to ground outs and recording the plays where you need him, but is now entering his free agency after he declined his player option and has received a qualifying offer from the Diamondbacks. But we know that there are several teams that are interested, most notably the rumors floating around is the Yankees and the Nationals, as well as apparently 4 so far unnamed teams. I think we can probably expect Houston are going to be in there in terms of their needs for basemen, with Alex Bregman entering his free agency. So while the D-backs have extended a qualifying offer of $21 million, he will likely be looking for a lot more than that. I think a lot of people are expecting, a multi-year deal looking around the $60-70 million mark, which of course is a lot of money, but he is a lot of player. Can we keep him? I'm not certain. I think the D-backs already very publicly have been exploring some other options. Obviously, we'd love to have Christian Walker back. We've already renewed our deal with Eugenio Suarez to keep him at third base. And, Suarez had a pretty rough start to the year, but, turned it around pretty impressively. But whether or not we can do the same deal with Walker is a little bit different, because I think Walker's going to cost a bit more. He's going to expect a bit more. And I think after his pretty impressive performances at times in the last couple of years, he's going to be expecting some promises and some visible progress to the team he joins, at least looking to make the postseason, probably get runs kind of late into September, October time. So whether or not we kind of say, yeah, you know what, we can guarantee you that, Christian, come back here, come back to Chase Field, and we will get you that silverware, maybe a ring, a couple of trophies, something like that. Looking at a pennant as well. It's sort of up in the air, and there's not been any particularly public discussions about what's been going on behind the scenes with, meetings, various agents, teams, players, etc. We don't know too much about what's going on behind the scenes with the Christian Walker situation, and it's very early in the Stove League to, start making really solid predictions about where he's going to go. So we'll leave that alone. But I think a lot of people are operating onto the assumption that no, Christian Walker will not be at first base for the Diamondbacks next year, and have already very much shifted their focus onto who will be. And that is the big question. And the name that's being floated around is one that will seem very familiar to a lot of Diamondbacks fans, and that is Paul Goldschmidt, because the known possible options from free agency include, the likes of Josh Bell, who did a good job filling in for Walker while he was injured out. in Diamondbacks this year. Came in, of course, from, pretty good time at Pittsburgh. He's well regarded, very professional, but, not quite as much power, not quite as much slug, not quite as much defense, just a perfectly passable option. But people want Paul Goldschmidt, and if we compare the stats from the last year, Josh Bell hit 249 average, 19 homers, 71 RBI, 134 hits, and that, of course, was between Miami and the Diamondbacks. Whereas Paul Goldschmidt has a 245 average, so a little bit less than Bell, but had 22 home runs, which is 3 more. Only 65 RBI, but 147 hits. So, the productivity is very different. But we also have to consider, we're the Diamondbacks. We're no strangers to signing veteran players. Goldie is 5 years older than Josh Bell. He's 37 now. So you look at, we're used to signing veterans. That's fine. But in this case, is Goldie past it? I don't know. Look at his stats over the last couple of years. The Cardinals is 154 games played in both 2024 and 2023. Just under 600 at bats in each year. But, sort of fell off a little bit between 2022 and 2024. 2023, he hit 89 runs as opposed to 80 runs batted in 2023, 65 in 24. That's off of 12 fewer hits. Saw 87 BB in 2023 as opposed to 47 in 2024. In 2023, struck out 161 times. 2024, he struck out 173 times. 2023, he hit an average of 268. 2024, it's 245. And both of those are below his career average of 289. So, can he still hack it? I think so. I don't think those numbers represent quite as much of an asset that Goldie could be to any team that goes after him in his free agency. I don't know whether or not it's likely that he'll come back. I think if you listen to other podcasts in the Diamondbacks arena, people are saying, he'd be a great presence, great clubhouse asset. Archie Bradley has spoken very highly of him. Of course, they were teammates on the Diamondbacks for a while. He's a huge presence, consummate professional, does everything with, the expectation of pushing himself to be the best that he can be. So having a veteran who's such an icon for the Diamondbacks back in that clubhouse, I think would be a great move. We've got plenty of guys, who are great clubhouse presences, and people talk about how much they put in behind the scenes, likes of Eugenio Suarez, Geraldo Perdomo, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. is another one who's been floated around as that sort of guy. Adding in Paul Goldschmidt, I think, gives some of the younger guys, a real icon of baseball to look up to. We've got some good players, don't get me wrong, but if you look at, somebody like Jordan Lawler or, your Alec Thomas, Jake McCarthy types who've had good careers so far, but, we expect to see a lot more from them in the next few years. Having Goldie towards the twilight of his career, spend those twilight years in Arizona, kind of being the hands-on leadership presence would be a huge asset to the Diamondbacks. So I don't think we should pass that up. But I also think his productivity, it's not two bad lines looking at his last couple of years. He's still, a top first baseman. He's not looking at the likes of, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. kind of numbers or money, but, he's Paul Goldschmidt. And I think that in itself carries a lot of weight. And if you're a pitcher and you're coming up against Goldschmidt in a Diamondbacks uniform, that's going to bring back some nightmares if you're a guy who pitched, around 2014, 2015. If you can leverage some of that in your at-bats and start playing, especially in a more hitter-friendly ballpark, St. Louis is not a kind of place for somebody like Goldschmidt to really show exactly how much power and pop they have in their bat. I think Chase Field would do a lot for that. Obviously, being back in the NL West, you're going to play people like the Rockies a lot more. You're going to get more at-bats in a lot more hitter-friendly stadiums than he did in the last couple of years. So let's say, I want Goldie to come back. I'm not going to join the raving crowd, which is like, sit on the fence, wait and see. It would be great to see him back. I would enjoy that a great deal. I was not a Diamondbacks fan when he was here the first time. In fact, I didn't even really know that much about baseball. I only got into the sport in 2019, 2020, and obviously Goldie had just departed in that trade. So, I would hear about, why do we get rid of Goldie? Why do we let him go from the guys who helped get me into baseball? But to this day, I've not seen him in a Diamondbacks uniform in person, and I think that is something I would very much like to change, before he retires, or, while he's still got some baseball left in him. So yeah, let's see how these things go. But I'll put it on the record. I'd love for Goldie to come back, and I don't see too many other options at first base that are, more realistic in terms of a whole all-round package that the Diamondbacks could bring in there if Christian Walker isn't going to be filling that spot next year. Let's move on to the other discussions, and now comes pitching, and this has been something that we always talk about on the show, is Diamondbacks pitching, and most notably Jordan Montgomery. So far is staying with the Diamondbacks. He's picked up his player option, so he's going to be picking up 20 odd million from us this year, and I think it's something like 22.5 million. And I think Diamondbacks very publicly are looking to shift a lot or as much of that money as they can. A lot of people are saying, just give him to whichever team will give us the most out of that salary. And, I'm tempted to agree with that, but, there's an inevitable cliche that wherever he goes, he'll probably win a Cy Young because, that's just the Diamondbacks' luck. Merrill Kelly is also staying with an option deal, but between those two guys, they had very different 2024s. The idea is, can we shift Montgomery, or do we have faith in giving him a proper spring training and kind of reinvigorating what is clearly a very tired arm? He was very vocal about, his spring training wasn't ideal last year. He was a very late signing, didn't do spring training with a team, was sort of doing it by himself. Took him a while to settle back in. And we saw some glimpses of, the Jordan Montgomery we were kind of expecting him to be last year, but not nearly enough. So I think the Diamondbacks very much will be exploring an option of how to shift Montgomery there. The rumor is we are exploring a trade for at least one of our starting pitchers beyond Montgomery. They were looking at whether or not, with both Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly going into free agency next year, can we get some value out of them, use that value well to land the sort of power bat or, a high leverage reliever that everyone's been crying out for, and if you can do that, I think we're in business. Obviously, Paul Sewald has now departed, and we wish him the best. He was obviously a huge asset in our run into the postseason last year. This year, it seems the baseball might have left him a little bit. He got taken out of that closer role, reduced to, a small bullpen presence. People are saying, install Justin Martinez as the closer. He's not quite there yet. But we've got two pretty good relievers in terms of, our 7th and our 8th inning guys. Justin Martinez and AJ Puck are pretty solid. You have the likes of Kevin Ginkel, Joe Manaply as well, who, are pretty solid, bullpen options. But I think the focus is going to be shifting as much of the Montgomery money as possible. And one option is to shift a lot of that money and then reinvest it, re-sign Jock Peterson. He's coming off of a career best 908 OBS, and we have to have a DH. He's probably going to be exploring his options. He's had an incredible year as that big lefty DH spot. He's been sort of platooning DH when you have Randall Grichuk coming in as the right-hander, who's also departed. So we are severely short on possible DH options. Some people are saying, look at your infield, could play Cattell as the DH a lot more often. I think that's potentially an option, but I would like to see us try and get the most out of guys already in our organization before we start, spaffing money on, anyone who looks like they can occasionally slug. I would like to see us kind of platoon the DH. Adrian Del Castillo, of course, has a fantastic hitting record very early in his career with the Diamondbacks. And if Gabby Moreno is going to be our first choice catcher, there's going to be a lot of times where, if Del Castillo isn't playing catcher, he's not going to get at bats. And I think that would be a huge waste of somebody who's hit some fantastic big home runs for the Diamondbacks already. So I'd like to see Del Castillo get some time there, and I think that's definitely an option. But what else do you do with that money that we're going to be leaving on the table if we don't go for somebody like Jock Peterson, if we don't get Randall Grichuk back? Kevin Newman's already gone to the Angels in this offseason, so what do we do with that money if we're not going to go for that? And looking at around the league, a lot of people are talking about, who wants Montgomery? And people are saying in Seattle that they want to send us somebody like Mitch Haniger. It's a name that's popped up a couple of times. Seattle fans are clearly keen to get him off their books. He's batted just over 200 last year. But, we do need some solid backup outfielders. I'm not too worried about the Diamondbacks outfield. We've got plenty of guys who can play there. But if we're going to do something and just want to shift some money first and focus on who we get second, that's going to be an option. But it's not a small amount of money to be spending on somebody. So do we start looking at spend that money on a real asset? A lot of guys have been talking about high leverage relievers, getting a closer in. Devin Williams has been a name that's floated around for years. He's been one of the best, potentially even the best closer in baseball. A pretty great 2024 if you don't really consider a postseason blow-up a deal breaker. Their regular season is 22 games, 1 win, no losses, but they're a closer, so wins losses isn't really indicative of too much. But a 1.25 ERA and 21.2 innings pitched with 38 strikeouts. And, he's another veteran guy, but if he can come in and have the sort of impact that like an elite closer at the time like Paul Sewald had, you're good. But I think a lot of people are looking for a slightly different breed of reliever. I think we're looking for more speed than just finesse. As amazing as that sinker and curve that Devin Williams throws is, I think if you're going to balance it out in the bullpen, AJ Park and Justin Martinez are going to be our 7th and 8th inning first choices against most lineups, if it's a fairly balanced lineup. Justin Martinez has showed he's got the stuff. He maybe just needs a bit more control. Whereas AJ Park was one of our best trades. It sort of flew under the radar a bit last year, but coming in, big guy did an amazing job. So maybe we'll be seeing him looking at, locking down a closer role. The Diamondbacks pitching has always been an interesting issue. Like Brent Strom has now departed and has found himself, I think it's an assistant pitching coach role over at the Pirates, and he's gone to work with guys like Paul Skeens. They've got the likes of Aroldis Chapman as well. They've got a big load of young arms also in need of development over there, so I think he'll do just fine. But he's been very vocal. He likes to work with fastball guys, and he'll settle in right there. Whereas we've brought in Kaplan from the Phillies to be our new pitching coach, and he's somebody the Phillies fans have been quite vocal. They're a bit disappointed to lose to us, so obviously listen to our staff, see what they have to say. Phillies obviously have had some pretty good pitchers in the last few years. They've really brought on some guys, like Ranger Suarez is pretty good. They've got, people like Nola over there, great pitchers. If we can develop our all-round pitching game to be at the kind of the Phillies level, you look at how well they did this year, and I think we're probably going to do okay. And speaking of doing okay with pitching, the hot news coming out of Japan, which I'm a little late to the party on, but hey, news travels slowly here in the UK. We get it all in the post. Japanese sensation Roki Sasaki is being posted at 23 years of age instead of the 25 a lot of people would have been expecting to, by his team in the Japanese league, the Chiba Lotte Marines. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's expected that every team in baseball is going to be chasing their signature, although a lot of pundits are predicting him to go to the Dodgers to link up over there with Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Shohei Ohtani. But most people are predicting, just more in general, an NL West destination. The Dodgers obviously are the bookies' choice there, but the Padres are looking like a hot second with the influence of Yu Darvish over there as sort of a semi-father figure / mentor, not to be underestimated for a lot of the young guys who play in the Japanese national team. But if Gallen or Kelly or Montgomery and or one of Ryan Nelson or Tommy Henry potentially are on the trade block for the Diamondbacks, with us looking to maximize what we can out of their value, if one of those guys or multiple of those guys departs, firstly, that frees a lot of money up. But secondly, it frees up the ace pitcher role, like the main man, the guy who's going to go out there, throw 6-7 shutdown innings and be, one of the faces of the franchise in Phoenix, in Arizona, and, in America, and in this case, probably even globally. That's a role that's, it's pretty attractive if you're looking to come over and not hang out in, another player's shadow, I think. Sasaki's not going to make as much money as he would if he had been posted at 25. He's coming over and will technically be a rookie. He'll be, under team control for, I think it's at least 5 years in this case. And he's only going to be making peanuts, like when Ohtani came over and signed with the Angels and didn't really maximize his contract value until that ludicrous deal at the Dodgers. It'll be a similar situation for Sasaki. Whichever team gets him is going to get him for not very much money. So we'll have to sell him more on the pitch of what you can offer him as an organization, what you can offer him in terms of his long-term career and his personal development. And if he's a guy who doesn't want to really share a spotlight or be overshadowed by another star, I think saying come to Arizona, you can pitch all year round, it's probably going to be the best for your health, and you will be, one of the faces of the franchise and certainly an ace pitcher immediately. I don't think that's an unattractive option, especially if he likes the idea of the NL West, maybe going up against his mentors, but still being in the same division and maintaining that close relationship. Maybe that's an attractive prospect that we don't really know about. So he's a pretty sensational pitcher if you look at his career so far. So far, he's 419 innings pitched. It's 524 Ks with a 2.02 ERA. But he throws 102-mile-an-hour fastball and has a crazy splitter-slider combination. And that is exactly the kind of intimidating shutdown ace that both the Diamondbacks and myself have been crying out for a while. He's a different kind of pitcher to Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly. We've got some really good swing and miss guys who can, absolutely chop down teams on their day. But, they throw a lot of breaking ball off-speed stuff, and we need, I think, a starting pitcher who can go out and just, shut things down just through the strength of their own arm and confidence in a lot of times. And that's exactly what Roki Sasaki, I think, would represent. I think he'd definitely be, one of your 1-2 top of the order guys for sure. I don't think anybody's looking at him and saying, oh yeah, Sasaki, come be behind, these two other dudes. I think if he comes in, he's coming in to be the number one, or at least the number two in that rotation. But seeing him in a Diamondbacks uniform doesn't seem like it's a particularly likely prospect right now, given all the noise that people are making out of those teams out on the West Coast and whether or not, the Yankees are going to go after him, splash some money on there, seeing if they can pair him up with somebody like Garrett Cole. Every team in baseball is pitching to this guy. Apparently he's going to hear pitches from all 30 teams. So, you have to admire the professionalism to consider every possible option for him. He's apparently quite a quiet, reserved guy, and he's, I think, gone through some personal tragedy as well very early in his life, and that's got to be something that'll have an effect on his long-term outlook. So I've got to say, we have to respect the guy wherever he goes and see how well he does, but it's some encouraging early signs. If the race is between, teams in the NL West, I'm sorry, I don't think he's going to go to Colorado. Like, if you want to be a pitcher, the last thing you want to do is go and play half of your early career at Rockies Park, because that's not going to be very good for you. You throw one mistake, you will get punished for it. But I think there's plenty of places he could land, but it would be cool to see him come to Arizona, and I think that's a nice, optimistic future outlook to keep in mind as we wrap up the episode. Of course, remember to like this wherever you're listening, subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, follow us if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms. Please go follow us at T-Backs Podcast on any of the social media platforms, and I have been, of course, your host at GB Diamondback. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.